Bruce Lipton. I loved a passage in this book, Spontaneous Evolution, about cells and how originally they were all operating individually, and then they learnt to work together, and then they learnt to specialize in different areas, but still with an idea to working for the whole. Then you leap from that to human constructs, to human societies. Tell me that link. Tell me what that's about.
The link is this. The original belief, you've probably seen it in school. It was called the Tree of Life. It was actually drawn about late 1800s. And it puts all the organisms on this planet in a hierarchy, from the most primitive bacteria at the base of the tree to humans at the very top of the tree. And the vision was, well, what is responsible for the hierarchy? What is responsible for your level on that tree versus being a low level and a high level? We originally thought it was genetics, that higher organisms in the tree have much more genes, and genes were providing for the complexity and the structure and the behavior and all that. So organisms at the top of the tree have much more genes than organisms at the lower bottom of the tree. So evolution was driven by how many genes we have. That whole thing collapsed when the Human Genome Project came in. For the recognition is this. One of the first organisms they did genotyping on to find out how many genes was a miniature worm. It's about a couple of millimeters at the most, millimeter maybe. 1,271 cells, very small organism. I said, well, how many genes? 20,000 genes. So that's a good starting point, okay? And how many genes did we expect? Scientists had a vision of the number they expected even before they did the human genome, and it was in excess of 100,000 genes, and that would make us at the top of the tree versus the worm at the bottom. So, I love Mother Nature, cosmic jokester is the best. The results of the Human Genome Project come in, and guess how? A human has about 20,000 genes.
The same as
the smallest one. And all of a sudden I said, wait, then as you go up the tree, it wasn't necessarily based on genes at all. No, it's not.
Well, maybe there shouldn't be a tree, Bruce. Maybe it's all just
one big flat line. Well, it's actually more like a bush than a tree, because it grows out in all directions at once.
So what does it, apart from humbling the human race and our hubris, what does it tell us? What can we learn from that?
Genetics is not the foundation of evolution. Consciousness is the foundation of evolution, meaning at the bottom of the tree, organisms have the least amount of so-called consciousness, and as you go up to the top of the tree, it's an elaborate and expanded consciousness.
So that cries out for a definition of consciousness.
Yeah.
What's yours?
And see, so consciousness then has to do with the brain. You say, well, what about a single cell organ? And I say, well, a single cell has a brain as well. It obviously has to live in the world and adjust its biology. I say, well, what is it? Well, we used to say the nucleus where the genes are. That whole thing has now disappeared. The nucleus is like a file cabinet with patterns to make the cell. But it doesn't have any information of how to use the patterns, when they should be used, or why they should be used. They're just patterns in a drawer. It turns out the cell membrane, the skin, is the source of the nervous system. I say, well, what relevance to that? And I say, primitive organisms like a bacteria live inside a capsule. There's like a matrix, like a skeleton on the outside. So the bacterium can only be so big. It couldn't get any bigger because it's constrained. So I said, well, what's the relevance? I said, well, evolution made the smartest membrane in a bacterium. And then guess what? It ended. Why? I couldn't add any more membrane, make it more intelligent, because it's locked inside this capsule. So I said, well, does it mean evolution stopped? I said, for a moment it did, because I couldn't make the individual bacterium smarter. But then nature came up with another way. So what if you bring a whole bunch of bacteria together into one membrane? And that's called a biofilm. I said, what was the relevance? Each unit bacterium has a certain amount of consciousness. But when you put 1,000 of them inside the membrane, you have 1,000 times the consciousness. Oh, so the first level is make the individual smart. The second level was to make a community of individuals. Well, that community of bacteria became what is called the amoeba. And then the next phase was to make the smartest amoeba possible. And we get to the end. Why? It's a single-celled organism with a single membrane around it. It can't get any bigger than a certain size because the membrane would rupture like a balloon with too much water in it, causes the balloon to break. So cells became limited. I said, oh, guess what? Made the smartest amoeba, but I couldn't make it any smarter because if I add more membrane, it gets too big, it's not safe. I said, oh, evolution stopped. Smartest amoeba I can make. And then I say, then what happened? Oh, amoebas came together in community. I say, yeah, and I say every plant and animal that you see on this planet is, by definition, a community of amoebas, including us. We have 50 trillion amoebas. We're a community. I go, yeah, So I create a new organism called the human, which is actually a community of amoebas, and then I say, guess what? Pack that skull with as much brain tissue as you possibly can. And I say, guess what? I can't make any more brain inside a human skull. Humans reached the limit of their brain capacity a while back. I say, so what's evolution now? I say, I can't make us any smarter. We've maximized the amount of space in that skull. Evolution stop. Next evolution. Same pattern again. You bring humans together to share their awareness. So we are in an evolutionary state right now. What? We've already advanced the human to the fullest level of its ability, and now we're looking for evolution to the next level. I say, humans are cells that in a community form a new organism, a superorganism called humanity. So the evolution is not the evolution we're facing now, not us. We've already evolved. The evolution is the evolution of the community of humans. And it's interesting because that's what we're seeing right now is, how is that coming together? And I said, most important recent advance is called the internet. Reason. The internet is a nervous system that connects 7 billion human cells into one organism. I say, look what's going on around the world. Borders are breaking down. The communities are breaking down.
People are wanting a better world.
A better world.
Consciousness is raising.
Because the internet has shown them. I mean, if you lived in some place in the desert in the Mideast, and you're just making it day by day, scraping by, and you turn on the internet and you see these people in Australia, New Zealand, North America, England living, and you go, wow, look at their lives. What am I doing in a sand pile? And all of a sudden, they're not happy. Arab Spring says, we are being, we're losing out on life because we can see everybody else's life.
In your own country, Bernie Sanders waking people up about
Thank
the
goodness.
media.
Thank goodness.
Questions about the media, about politics, all sorts of things. So this is where human evolution is headed now. We need to work together. John, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, because it goes even further than this, because our brain its major capacity is like a transmitter of information coming in and out. So it's downloading like a computer, and that's morphogenetics. There's a whole different way of defining this, Carl Jung's collective consciousness. And as Bruce says, this aggregated consciousness, which is not working at a metabolic level, it's working at a higher level, a quantum level of information exchange. So that's basically what we're trying to do with clients once we got them through a stage past survival into a thrival environment. And Bruce can talk later on if he's interested in Rupert Sheldrake's work of morphogenetics, where you did the 100 monkey principle, where you start to get groups of people becoming way more cooperative, at a much higher level of performance and potentiality. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Over time on this in a minute, but I would like to add something very important.
I love it.
Is that if you look at the human evolution and the planet, and you look at them like archaeologists, and you say, for about 200,000 years or plus, when they dig up an archaeological site where earlier people lived for 200,000 years, they had the same tools, the same things were found at every site. Human never, for 200,000 years, were essentially the same. 30,000 years ago, all of a sudden, humans changed, technology came in. And today the technology is like vertical, that today, while we're talking, there's new technology that we'll find out tonight. I go, what was relevant? What was the increase that we were 200,000 years staying exactly the same, and then all of a sudden, boom, an evolution and humans jumped up. The first scientist, being physical, mechanical, said, there was a change in genetics, so we got smarter. Or B, there was a change in nervous system that made us smarter, and now we know what the answer was. The answer was human community. Because it takes a bunch of different humans to see things in a different way, to put their information together to create something new. If you lived, there was just like 3 of us in a community, and I say, hey, let's build a rocket to the moon. You go, what's the moon? What's a rocket? We can't get there, whatever. And it's like, no, not 3 of us, But let's say, for example, a number, how many people did it take to make a computer? 50,000 different people, each with small advance, collectively made a computer. What's the nature? We are coming together now in a bigger conglomeration of humans, which is called emergence, that new ideas are going to be there tomorrow that we wouldn't even think of at this minute right now, and tomorrow you might go, oh my God, the world's changed, new idea.
But all dependent on us coming together like those amoeba in community.
In community,
Thank
because
you.
community is evolution.
Community is evolution. Thank you. Bruce
Thank
Lipton.
you.
Wonderful.